Hello and good morning. This one's going to be coming to you a little bit off the dome because I woke up this morning and I saw a series of takes that were both surprising to me, but I do think that they're also a good teachable moment in terms of how people write good questions for surveys and how people extrapolate information and make conclusions based on the responses that they get. Now, I also want to assume that everyone here is acting in good faith, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that as well. So let's go ahead and get started at the beginning with this poll from Anna Sakagawa, who works at Red Bull Gaming Japan. Anna asks, what is your impression on NFT in gaming? Now, NFTs, if you aren't aware, are non-fungible tokens. They're basically a cryptocurrency equivalent of private property. Now, in this response, from about 57 votes, Anna gets a 65% response rate from people saying they don't know what NFTs are, and that's a perfectly valid inference. Generally, people in these spaces, the people that responded to this, don't know what she's really asking about. Now, that leads us to a secondary poll from Ryan Harvey, aka Fubarduck. And Fubarduck asks, would you be happier if you had full self-ownership of in-game DLC and there was a secondary market to purchase these items used? Or would you prefer that game companies retain full ownership of all DLC that you purchase? Now, there are a couple red flags that are jumping up at me as a research psychologist. One, this is what we call a loaded question, and I'm actually surprised that only 66% of people in this poll said that they would like full self-ownership of DLC. But what this is really an example of, and all loaded questions are an example of, is what we call a framing effect. You might have ever heard the question, is the glass half empty or half full? This is another example of a framing effect. Depending on how you frame the same information or how you ask the same question, you might get very different responses or very different behaviors. Let's see. For example, the classic example, what if I asked you, speeches against democracy should be banned? Versus asking you, speeches against democracy should not be allowed. The real operant difference is banned versus not allowed, but there's something about the wording of that question that makes it so that most people will say they shouldn't be allowed, but they're not willing to say they should be banned, even though it's fundamentally the same thing. So that leads us to kind of the ultimate problem here. So this is a lead-in question that's ostensibly about digital ownership more broadly. So let's go into let's put this away here and let's go up. No. This is what happens when I do things off the dome. Anyway, let's go to the conclusion though. So based on these two surveys, Fubarduck tries to make the conclusion that these two questions are fundamentally asking the same thing. And they're not. Anna's question is about NFTs. Ryan's question is about digital ownership. These are not fundamentally the same question, and you can't really make the comparison that Ryan is trying to here, which is to say that people don't know what NFTs are or that NFTs have a branding problem. Because if you were to say, would you like self-ownership of your DLC, that's something NFTs can do, but NFTs aren't the only pathway to it. So it's a way of, this inference isn't necessarily valid based on the data that you have. And that data that you have is actually coming from a pretty loaded question. And I would say, as someone who does this professionally, is not well written or well constructed. And just to kind of poke a hole here, and again, I do think everyone's operating in good faith, NFTs aren't necessarily essential for having a digital marketplace like this. I mean, Valve did it back with Team Fortress 2 and selling hats almost 10 years ago. So it seems like it's kind of an odd conclusion to draw here. And so I wanted to just kind of revisit this and shoot off a quick video about it, because this kind of stuff happens all the time. People, look at loaded questions, they make weird inferences and all this, but, by and large, if you ask questions in a heavily framed or leading manner, you don't really get to make valid inferences from them. And in the case of here, it looks like you're trying to really compare apples and oranges, and that maybe with the motivation to try to make it seem like people want non-fungible tokens in their games, when it seems like that isn't even the case. If you go back to Anna's tweet, of the people who did say they knew what NFTs were, there's almost a 3-to-1 ratio of people saying no relative to yes. I mean, that's 75% relative to 25%, I hope that adds to 100%. I'm not good at public math, but Yeah, I mean, this is wanted to be just a quick video to address this and kind of lay out my thoughts here. Because, it's not easy to write good questions and it's not easy to make great inferences. And this is just a case that seemed like a really good example of that. And, if there's one thing I do love more than dunking on cryptocurrency, it's teachable moments. So maybe this will be helpful. And if you're looking to learn more, tune into my lectures and stuff. It's cool. Thanks for listening to me. Take care.